But I also want to introduce you the PERMA model to happiness proposed by Martin Seligman. And she came out with the PERMA model. What does it mean? PERMA is the abbreviations of the 5 key words to 5 important elements to feel better, to cope well for happiness. And the PERMA model includes the positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And you can see what is shown here. The positive emotion includes feeling positive, such as joy, great gratitude, sincerity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awesome, and love. If you always experience this kind of positive emotions, you're not going to be so easily let down or defeated by negative emotions. And engagement means fully absorbed in activities that use your skills and challenge you, means you have something important to do. Whatever happens to you, stressful or miserable, you can do something to distract your attention. And relationships means having positive relationships, including the families, friends, colleagues. Whatever happens, you always work together with people, not alone. And the meaning, it means you have the belonging and the serving something that I believe is bigger than yourself. The meaning for the society, the meaning for serving people important to you. An accomplishment means pursue success, winning, achievement, mastery of your own sake. So this is the flourishing. And let's get a quote from Martin Seligman himself. These 5 elements are the best approximation of what humans pursue for their own sake. Although individuals may sometimes pursue these elements for other ends, e.g., they may, for instance, think that accomplishment may bring them positive emotion. Many choose to do so because these elements are intrinsically motivating by themselves. And here are the books if you have time to read. Authentic Happiness or Learned Optimism. We talked about Martin Seligman before, and I will recommend you to have time to read books. Both books have Chinese translations. And not only that, let's invite Professor Martin Seligman to talk to us about the meaning and goals of positive psychology. And you're going to think about these questions while you listen. First, what did Martin Seligman say about the goals of positive psychology? Second, what did Martin Seligman say about the ways of positive psychology? And thirdly, what do you learn from watching this video tape?
In our rush to do something about people in trouble, in our rush to do something about repairing damage, it never occurred to us to develop interventions to make people happier, positive interventions. So that was not good. And so that's what led people like Nancy Etkoff, Dan Gilbert, Mike Csikszentmihalyi, and myself to work in something I call positive psychology, which has 3 aims. The first is that psychology should be just as concerned with human strength as it is with weakness. It should be just as concerned with building strength as with repairing damage. It should be interested in the best things in life, and it should be just as concerned with making the lives of normal people fulfilling and with genius, with nurturing high talent. So, in the last 10 years, and the hope for the future, we've seen the beginnings of a science of positive psychology, a science of what makes life worth living. It turns out that we can measure different forms of happiness, and any of you for free can go to that website and take the entire panoply of tests of happiness. You can ask, how do you stack up for positive emotion, for meaning, for flow, against literally tens of thousands of other people. And starting about 6 years ago, we asked about extremely happy people and how do they differ from the rest of us. And it turns out there's one way, very surprising, they're not more religious, they're not in better shape, they don't have more money, they're not better looking, they don't have more good events and fewer bad events. The one way in which they differ, they're extremely social. They don't spend time alone. Each of them is in a romantic relationship, and each has a rich repertoire of friends. But watch out here. This is merely correlational data, not causal, and it's about happiness in the first Hollywood sense I'm going to talk about. Happiness of ebullience and giggling and good cheer. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not nearly enough in just a moment. The upshot of this is that the mission I want psychology to have, in addition to its mission of curing the mentally ill, in addition to its mission of making miserable people less miserable, is can psychology actually make people happier? And to ask that question, happy is not a word I use very much. We've had to break it down into what I think is askable about happy. And I believe there are three different, and I call them different because different interventions build them. It's possible to have one rather than the other. Three different happy lives. The first happy life is the pleasant life. This is a life in which you have as much positive emotion as you possibly can and the skills to amplify it. The second is a life of engagement, a life in your work, your parenting, your love, your leisure. Time stops for you. That's what Aristotle was talking about. And third, the meaningful life. So I want to say a little bit about each of those lives and what we know about them. The first life is the pleasant life. And it's simply, as best we can find it, it's having as many of the pleasures as you can, as much positive emotion as you can, and learning the skills, savoring mindfulness, that amplify them, that stretch them over time and space.
Okay. You have watched this videotape, you know the answers, and you'll be inspired by this big scholar who led psychology into positive negative rather than the negative territory of studying every day on depression, jealousy, aggression, resentment, anxiety. We study something positive like optimism, humor, creativity, forgiveness, gratitude, altruism. That's the ingredients of happiness. Seligman also advocates for three kinds of life: the pleasant life, the good life, and a meaningful life. If you have this kinds of life, you have a positive emotion, positive attitudes of your life. And in order to exemplify this, let's still go back to history, okay? Remember, in earlier talk, I talked about how to end the sufferings. There are four ways or scenarios represented by four iconic figures in Chinese history. The first one is to die to end, represented by Qu Yuan. The second, to live to end, represented by Tao Yuanming. The third one is to drink to end, represented by Li Bai. And the fourth one is to laugh to end, represented by Su Dongpo. An interesting part of Su Dongpo is that he is as famous now as he was 900 years ago. In fact, he's probably more famous now than before. Why is he so favored by the Chinese for so many centuries? Most important of all is he is an iconic figure of optimism. And this is not proposed by me, it's proposed by another famous writer, Lin Yutang. He wrote a book, it's called The Gay Genius, talking about all the charisma of Su Dongpo, rather than addressing his poems, his writing styles. It's about his personality, how his personality saved him from all these sufferings. Now, one of his best poems reflecting his optimism is this one. We all know. Probably every educated Chinese can recite at least one poem or one sentence from Su Dongpo's famous poems. I'll just give you one example, revealing his optimistic attitudes, his mind flourishing. Okay, is this one. I'll give you the Chinese first. 花褪残红青杏角，燕子飞时绿水人家绕。枝上柳绵吹又少，天涯何处无芳草。Well, here is the English translation. I have it for you. Flowers fade while apricots look sign and small. Swallows fly over while stream water flows by. While willow cottons are blown less and away, green grass grows everywhere around. I'm not saying my English translation is good, but at least it shows up the contrast. Each sentence has a contrast within itself. It's from negative to positive, is to languishing to flourishing, from pessimistic to optimistic, particularly the last one. While willow cottons are blown less and away, green grass grows everywhere around. This is how an optimist mind perceives the world. Whatever happens is always pleasant, is always cheerful. We all know Su Dongpo was demoted 2 times in his lifetime, in his career. But he used the time to develop his hobbies. We all know he's a good cook. Now, during his demoted time, he developed his cuisine skills, including Dongpo pork, Dongpo hook, Dongpo soup, Dongpo chicken. He also crafted his painting, including bamboo, stones, figures, trees. He also developed his style, like design style, including cloth hat, straw hat, bamboo pine, lifting pot. You can see he is a government official. He done so many things. When he was depressed, he was demoted. And then he could be so productive in other areas, how optimistic the person is. Now here are some pictures, okay? The painting, this is part of the painting he drew for the bamboo, the Dongpo pork, the Dongpo teapot, and Dongpo straw hat, all has to do with him. And this is his own painting, his figure paint, portrait painting for himself in a simple way and also in an impressionist way. I personally took this photo in Huangzhou when I visit his museum there. Now, I even developed this chart for you to look at his accomplishments. This is like the up and downs in his lifetime. Look at the solid line, that means his up and downs. The dotted line means the rebounds after his death. Okay, this is the guy that's been talked so much because when he died, he just nobody in terms of the government service. But he became so popular ever since because of his charm, charisma, being optimistic, effective coping for later followers to imitate, to emulate. And here is another chart I produced for documenting his achievements during his demoted time, for his accomplishments in cuisine, for soup, for porridge, and for wine. No wonder everybody loves him. And this is the book, written by Lin Yutang. It's called The Gay Genius. Lin Yutang wrote about Su Dongpo in English. This is the first time Su Dongpo was an internationally well-known historical literal figures. His charms, he not only charms the Chinese, he also charms people in Japan, in Asia, in America, in Europe, everywhere. He has fans. So, do you want to be a gay genius like Su Dongpo? That's the question I leave for this lecture. And having said all of this, I thank you very much for taking my course, because today is the last class. I hope if you have time, you can periodically look back to what I've talked to you. Probably when you relook at it, you may have some new feelings. Having said all of this, I thank you very much for taking my course. In the future, somewhere, sometime, we're gonna meet. Thank you.